Dr. Arif is the Lead Technical Officer at the University of New South Wales Library Repository Services. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But anyway, it's good. He provides technical leadership to development of information repositories to faculty to facilitate curation and preservation. We might talk to you about that later on. Okay. Prior to joining UNSW in September 2012, he worked as a senior research scientist at the Science and Technology Facilities Council in the UK, where he led several European and UK projects in the area of advanced environmental informatics and digital preservation. Like I said, we'll have to talk to you later on. Will you welcome Arif?
Right, good afternoon everyone. I must admit I'm still a bit mesmerised by Justin's presentation, so it was a rather good one, wasn't it? But I have to warn you, I'm a Primo novice, so I've just been exposed to Primo probably the past 3 to 4 months. So be gentle when you ask me questions, but fortunately I do have my colleague, unless she's, there you go, Sue. So if there are any too technical or too complex questions, hopefully she'll be able to answer those questions. So yeah, as Dave said, I work for the University of New South Wales Library, but there's a group within the library called Library Repository Services, or in short LRS. So I'm going to talk about some of the Primo customizations that we've implemented or are currently implementing at the University of New South Wales Library to facilitate efficient search and discovery of the contents of our information repositories. And that's interesting stuff. But before that, I thought I'd give you a bit of a boring stuff. So just a bit of a background as the context or the motivation, if you will, for our work that we're doing. So the University of New South Wales is developing an infrastructure to facilitate effective curation and management of the university's research data collections. And the library is actually playing an important role in the development of that. And the Library Repository Services, of which I'm a part, so it's a group or a team actually within the library, that supports this by developing and providing the faculties with web-based repositories, information repositories, for managing their data resources. And of course, these repositories have Primo as the associated search and discovery service. But the underlying business model has been rather difficult to sustain or even scale, because until now we've developed these repositories on ad hoc basis. So a faculty or a group or a school within faculty would approach us with their requirements for a repository and would work with them to incorporate their customization requirements, including their Primo customizations, in the development of the repository. Consequently, we've ended up with a number of repositories with varying levels of customizations and of course the associated maintenance tasks. So as you can imagine, it's a bit of a pain when it comes to upgrading or updating some of the underlying components, particularly Primo. So we've recently upgraded to Primo 4.2. It's actually Sue's team. Did a very good job of doing that. But we had to make sure, it was a bit of a task for us to thoroughly test and ensure that some of the customizations that we've done before remained operational. So in 2012, which was just last year actually, we thought maybe we should try and improve this model. So the LRS, my group, sort of commenced an initiative which was rather misleadingly named the Multi-Repository Project, but anyway, it's for developing a more cost-effective, sustainable, and even scalable infrastructure to support the provision of these repositories. So what we had in mind that we'd build repositories with a standard set of customizations just out of the box. So the underlying architecture would be each faculty would have a repository which would consist of a Fedora instance, which is essentially an open source. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of Fedora, but it's an open source repository software for storing information. So you can store anything you throw at it. And you'd also have a set of web-based forms for editing, creating, editing, and managing these records within Fedora. And of course, there'll be Primo to provide, to enable search and discovery of these records. And in principle, we'd be able to replicate this architecture for any faculty that needs a repository. And by doing so, we'll be able to delegate some of the administrative tasks to the faculties themselves. So they'll be able to manage their own contents. We'll still be doing the underlying maintenance and the upgrades, but the contents-related management or the administrative tasks would be performed by the faculties themselves. So the kind of decreases in the maintenance effort in principle. So with that in mind, we started working in September last year, and we expect to complete the development of the first set of repositories by September this year, actually. To implement this improved model or infrastructure, if you like, the first step for us was to actually design the architecture for Primo integration. So I mentioned earlier that each faculty would have its own Fedora instance, but if the faculty happens to have individual schools or groups with their own data collections, then we'd actually have those stored in the Fedora. So Fedora is actually capable of storing or separating collections, basically collections of data. And so either the Fedora instance or the collections would basically be mapped to a Primo data source using sort of the Primo pipe, essentially. So it would enable Primo to harvest records from that source. And each of these Primo data sources would then obviously have a Primo scope. So it would be either one Primo scope or multiple Primo scopes if there are multiple data sources. We thought we'd also have targeted search scopes to enable searching within a particular collection, if that did apply to the faculty. And of course, we'd have a more generic Primo search scope to enable searching across multiple collections. And I believe the targeted search scopes kind of appear as, sorry, is it not actually coming up? Should I get a bit closer? Right, so I believe the targeted search scopes kind of appear as either sort of a drop-down list, or you can have it as a tab, or any of that. So you can play around with the display a little bit. And obviously, this will be all sort of rendered through Primo View. So the next step for us was to create a list of Primo customizations that would be useful to all repositories. In other words, standardizing the Primo customizations. So not doing customization on ad hoc basis, but to standardize them so we can roll it out with each of our repository instances. So to that end, we consulted representatives from a number of faculties, university faculties, and assessed their customization requirements. And we learned that sort of their main requirements included having custom fields in a Primo detailed view. So when you look at the detailed view of a record, so they wanted a number of custom fields in that, which included a full citation of a resource. So usually a record is essentially a metadata about a resource. So they wanted a full citation of the resource as part of the record view, so it could just be copied and included in a publication or any other citation-related material. And of course, they also wanted direct links to actual resource. But in addition to that, they also wanted to be able to search based on the content of the resource rather than the record, the metadata record. Because usually the metadata record is a subset, or it describes the actual resource, but it may not necessarily contain all the information that's actually contained within the resource itself. But they wanted to be able to search based on any information that may or may not exist within the resource. So if it's a PDF file or if it's a journal article, then they would be able to search based on anything that's written in there. So it's a full text search, if you will. A number of the faculties that we spoke to have had video collections, what they call moving image collections, actually, quite a funky name for videos. But so yeah, they had video collections, and they wanted Primo to be able to. They wanted users to be able to play these videos directly through Primo. So as part of the Primo detail view, they would also be able. So if the record happens to be about a video, then they wanted the user to be able to play that video directly from within Primo. And of course, they wanted customizable thumbnails. So these are not actually based on resource types. This is based on individual resources. So a thumbnail could be generated from the resource itself. So if the resources are PDF files, then a thumbnail could be the first page of the PDF file. If it's a video, then it could be extracted from the video itself. So they don't want a set of pre-specified images as thumbnails, but they want thumbnails at sort of resource level, which I thought was quite pretty interesting. In addition to that, they also wanted advanced search options based on resources, so resource-specific advanced search options. So for instance, for a video collections, an advanced search option could be searching based on the duration of the video. That's one example, basically. So having created this list, the next step for us was obviously to start sort of implementing these things. For custom fields, we used file splitter. Are we all familiar with file splitters? More or less. My understanding is, I'll tell you my understanding, because it's probably be a bit of a, I don't know, a novice understanding, but I think it makes sense to me. It's an utility within Primo that enables manipulation of the records harvested by Primo, basically. So if it's a metadata record in Dublin core, you can use file splitter to add further information, or you can augment it, or you can enrich it, essentially. That's my understanding of file splitter. And we actually wrote custom file splitter by extending it's written in Java, so by extending the Primo, the class for file splitter for actually doing the custom fields. So setup of that is that there's a table called publishing. There's a subsystem called publishing. I think Jungming knows more about these things. So you actually have to specify the file splitter, the actual the class name within the table with the parameters that are needed to do whatever the processing the file splitter needs to do. Followed by that, the data source, the related data source would need to be configured to use that file splitter, otherwise the file splitter just won't be used. And of course you have to modify the normalization rules that Jungming demonstrated earlier in his presentation to actually capture the information produced by the file splitter. So whatever the information is augmented or added to the record harvested by Primo would be actually captured by the normalization rules. And finally, you have to configure the view to have the view display these updated fields. So if we quickly look at the workflow, what we have is that we have Primo harvesting metadata records in Dublin core. We use unqualified Dublin core mainly. I think we use mods on mods. What does it stand for, Sue? Is it? I don't know. But anyway, it's another library format. It's not Mark. It's not as complex as Mark's, which is probably good news. So, but we mostly use unqualified Dublin core format as the format our metadata records. So we have Primo harvesting those records. But once harvested, these records go through the file splitter. And what the file splitter does, it does a number of things. So first, it tries to build a citation based on the information provided in the record, but using an external tool called Citation Builder. So it kind of interacts with an external tool, use the information, and pass the information to Citation Builder. The Citation Builder returns the citation, and then it adds it to the Dublin core record. It also obviously captures the links to the direct for directly accessing the resources. And finally, it does full text generation. So using the information in the record, it goes back to Fedora. It grabs the whole resource. In case of PDF, you'd get the whole PDF. Then it has another built-in utility, which then extracts all the text from the PDF and adds another field adds another field to the Dublin core. So the updated Dublin core record is stored in the Primo database. Okay. So just to give you an example of the, so just a simple example, the citation. I'm not sure you can see this. This bit here is actually added by the file splitter. Originally, it had just this title. So file splitter uses the information here in conjunction with the citation builder to build this information and adds it to the updated Dublin core record. And the way it is displayed in the Primo font, and I'm not sure if you can actually see this. It's a rather dodgy screenshot, but this is how it actually appears. So this is a rather, I would say, more or less a standard citation, so you can just copy it and reference it, use it as a reference in any sort of written documents. And you've also got the links there. I mean, okay, there's nothing groundbreaking about these links. So anyway, so the links are there as well. So after that, we started working the video tab. So I have to admit that this is still work in progress. So I actually don't have any screenshots to show for, but I'll just explain the underlying mechanism. So once again, we use a custom file splitter to get the Dublin core record, so to sort of extract from the harvested Dublin core records a number of things, the link to the actual video file, which is stored in Fedora, the MIME type, so type of the video format, so whether it's a, I don't know, MOV format or AVI format, so that information is extracted from Fedora as well, and it's augmented or added or inserted into the Dublin core record and stored in the database. Then you've got normalization rules, which extract or map these information onto a number of PNX, the fields in the PNX records. And in particular, the PNX records would then contain a link to a customized tab, which is a custom tile. So what you see here is, so when you search for within the collection, the video records are actually displayed. So you got the details view, which provides you, which displays a detailed view of the metadata record, and on online access, essentially a custom tile, which plays the actual video. Still work in progress. It's still not fully working properly, but that's the idea. And what the custom tile is essentially a JSP file, a Java server pages, that embeds a video player, but it's invoked as a lightbox. So you see, I think you're probably familiar with lightbox. So in the new version of Primo, you've got the advanced tab, which is actually displayed using lightbox. But we had to use a third-party lightbox. I'll explain why later. So the video is displayed as a modal window, and it's played. It's sort of played in that window. So that's the underlying sort of mechanism. As I mentioned, it's still not working fully, but hopefully we'll be able to get that to work in a couple of weeks. So next thing was the custom thumbnail. Once again, we used file splitter to actually extract the link. So the thumbnails are generated when the records are deposited into Fedora. So if the user deposits a video record in Fedora, now we've got a little utility in Fedora which extracts thumbnails from the video and records it as part of Fedora. So Fedora is capable of storing a number of things within one digital objects, and these are usually these are actually referred to as data streams. So the thumbnails are stored as data streams. So the file splitter, using the information within the metadata record, goes back to Fedora, grabs the link to the thumbnail, and updates the Dublin core record, which is then stored in the Primo database. And we then modify the normalization rules. We use the particular rule called link thumbnail. I've got a slide next which kind of goes into a bit more details. And so the links are included now in the PNX records, and when Primo renders the search page, it grabs it uses the link to download the image or the thumbnail from Fedora, and kind of affixes it on the thumbnail sort of the box there. So as you can see, there's an example. Oops. So this is essentially a part of a video, so it's not a static image. So if there's another record in the search result, it would have a different thumbnail. So you get it's sort of like an additional preview of the resource. So just to give you a closer look at the normalization rules, so we use the link thumbnail normalization rule, and you can have multiple thumbnails within the link thumbnail normalization rules. The Primo always use the first one. So here we have, this is taken directly from the Dublin core. That's updated by file splitter. But it's also possible to use a custom one. I think Jungming kind of demonstrated that to an extent earlier. So the way it's done, to have a custom one, you have to use a template, as Jungming demonstrated earlier. So, and you can actually have a combination of static and dynamic sort of values within there. So as you can see, the first portion of this URL is static, and the rest of the stuff is taken from the PNX records. And the next step is quite simple. They just say this is the custom value I want to use, and we just copy it as it is. I think it's also possible to do further transformation based on certain parameters there. So that's the thumbnails, the custom thumbnails. So the next bit of customization we did was advanced search. So which is I think it was compared to the video tab and the custom fields, I think it was slightly easier. So what we did was we had a local search field in the normalization rule, to represent the advanced search option. We then did a no harvest. We applied a no harvest, which essentially used to do update the PNX records without reharvesting the. You probably know about that. So yeah, we did that, and after that, we configured the view to add the local search field as an advanced search tile. But if we left it as it is, it would just be displayed as a box. But we didn't want it. We wanted it to be more controlled. So this is why we get into the JavaScript business. So we use JavaScript to replace that with actually a list of values. So going back to my previous example, so if it's actually I've got a screenshot next. So here's what it is. So here we've got duration. So without the JavaScript, it would just have a box there. But with the JavaScript, we've got a list of durations to kind of control the search, and same here. So it's just JavaScript. We actually embedded that in the header as opposed to the footer that Justin is doing with his JavaScript work. So those are essentially the main customizations that we've done and are also currently actually working on. So some of these things were sort of challenging for us. So the embedding the video player in the Primo front end was a bit of it was a bit messy because we wanted to use the lightbox that comes with Primo. We didn't want to use a third-party JavaScript just to decrease the or minimize the maintenance effort. But we found that it was too tied to the Primo framework. So you couldn't use the Primo lightbox. So we had to resort to an external lightbox. But more importantly, I think doing all these external customizations, the functional customizations, actually required considerable level of programming skills. And we are lucky to have that kind of expertise in the team, but it may not be the same, always. So we may lose expertise in future, and that would make the maintenance a lot more difficult. So in particular, when it comes to regression testing, as I mentioned, when it comes to upgrading Primo, we actually had to dedicate a considerable amount of effort to ensure that all these little customizations worked. So even with a set of standardized sort of customization requirements, you still need to have these kind of expertise, which I think this is just my personal opinion, when you are using a third-party product and you are purchasing and making considerable investment, I think it would be nicer to be able to do it out of the box, at least a bit more than what it currently does. Strictly my personal opinion. So it doesn't represent the UNSW library or anything. It's my personal opinion. So looking ahead in the future. Yes, yeah, that would be nice too. But I'm still in favor of kind of minimizing the programming effort. Because as I said, we are currently lucky to have a lot of expertise in the team, but I cannot guarantee that for the next 5 years or so. But on the positive side, I think the Primo upgrades are getting a lot smoother. I think that's definitely a good news. So looking ahead into the future, so we want to complete the video tab work. So we want to link it with a dedicated streaming media server, preferably with security, so that because some of the faculties don't want their videos to be downloaded. I think these days you cannot really prevent that, but you can make it a lot harder. So that's something we're looking to do. But we also want to be able to customize the Primo URLs. Because so what I mean by this, the URLs to detailed view of record, that as far as I know, that's quite persistent. So I can share the URL with anyone, but when you look at the URL, it's rather horrible. It's not human readable. It's quite opaque, And we'd like to decrease the opacity a little bit, maybe increase the balance between human readability and opacity. So you can infer some information just by looking at the URL. So okay, here's the resource I'm looking at, and this is what I'm expecting. So that's something, and I was just talking to Jungming, and I think apparently it's possible. So that's good news. I'd be very interested in that. But we also want to be able to harvest records in formats other than DC. In particular, we mentioned mods, but we want to increase our use of mods, but also RDF, which is a semantic web format, because we're doing a lot of work in the area of semantic web, and we have to start harvesting records in RDF, and enabling search and discovery of those records through Primo, and this is something we'll be looking to do. I think, like many other institutions, we still we are not using Fedorization at the moment, but we're interested in using that. In particular, sort of displaying different versions of records, as well as different formats of records. So this is also related to the semantic web work that we're doing. So idea is that you would be able to access multiple representations of a record through the same URL. So when you're looking at a detailed view of a record, you see in an HTML browser, you see it in HTML. So it makes sense to you. But if you want to do further manipulation, if you want to process it through some application, you need to have it in a machine readable format. But you should be able to do it through the same URL. So in other words, having multiple representations of the same record. So you can imagine having a Dublin core record in XML. So just looking at the URL, so here's the detailed view. Maybe you add a .xml or /.xml, you get the DC record. And you can pass it through an application and do further analysis, or you can combine it, you can aggregate it, and try and find different patterns, which is I think, it would be of benefit to our researchers, because they do this kind of stuff. And if we could do it through Primo, it would increase the power of Primo to a considerable extent. I don't think I'm forgetting anything else. And we definitely want to be able to do some of the things that Justin's doing with stats. That's definitely good stuff. And I've made a note of the URL, but I'm not really in favor of paying for things, so I'm not sure whether that's something, but we definitely want to draw inspiration from that. So we'll look into that. And I have to acknowledge the effort put in by my colleagues, Harry Sidonata and Abby Marie. They're the ones who actually do this work on regular basis in conjunction with a number of people from Sue's team. I mean, they really work magic. I mean, they know Primo pretty much inside out. So, I have to acknowledge their efforts. They also helped me put together the slides. And so, that's all the more credit to them. That's all. Thank you. And any questions?
Can you show us a video?
I can't. I said I couldn't because it's still work in progress. It's on a dev server which is not exposed outside the university network.
So from what you're saying, basically the Primo lightbox functionality that came in Primo 4.2 is not.
It's not reusable. You can't repurpose it.
So you've had your program in
Another lightbox library, yes.
because it has been. We have the digital viewer. There's a lot of people like lightbox. It's that maintenance.
Absolutely. Because when you
see any way to
no, at least we couldn't. As far as we kind of dug in, that's the conclusion we drew from that. I don't know if we put in more effort, but we work on a number of different projects, so we didn't really have the time to go into it any further. I was talking to Jungming about it, and maybe it is too tied to the framework. But when we first saw, Lightbox and Primo 4.2, we were quite excited. We thought, maybe we'll be able to just use it out of the box. But unless they made it very difficult, maybe it's still possible, but Primo's just made it too difficult to use for whatever reason. We just haven't been able to find a way around it yet.
So they'll click on the online tab and the box.
The box appears with the video playing. But you can also, if you click on the full screen mode, it goes into full screen. Sort of like YouTube, but just the presentation of the video is in a modal dialogue rather than
so you have like an MP4, but you click on the MP4.
That's right. Yeah, so you don't even have to click on the link. You just click on the online access, as I was showing before, the online access tab next to the detail tab, you just, yeah, that's what we're working on at the moment.
I think with respect to RDF, I know with the new Voyager upgrade, they're re-indexing in order to make it available in an RDF format, ready for RDF. And so I think that Primo, like before going down any track, I would check with Exlibris. In fact, we're going to check with Exlibris as well to see.
Okay, that's definitely interesting, yeah. But I think in principle it shouldn't be a problem because the normalization rules are pretty comfortable with XML-based things. RDF essentially, well, RDF could be represented in many different ways, but as long as we're using the RDF XML format, I think the Primo should be able to handle that. So I think I'm more confident with that than the other things like the Fedorization probably.
Yes.
Well, thanks for listening.
Thank you, back to you as well.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much.
Send me the read on the way home.
Okay, no worries.